I recently read The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. Work that stands out and stands the test of time is made in a creative state. Seeking a creative state can often be like turning the dial on an old radio. Most of the time you get static, but occasionally you land on a station and hear music. After reading The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, a legendary music producer, I realized there are 4 states that consistently lead to creative work. Understanding each state is like programming 4 go-to stations on your radio to skip the static and listen to music you love. The 4 states form the acronym ECIN: the experimental state, the clean slate state, the inspired state, and the novel approach state. In an experimental state, you have boundless curiosity as you let your inner child play without intervening. Enter an experimental state by asking as many what-if questions as you can think of, and be on the lookout for surprises. The lead guitarist for Rage Against the Machine and Audioslave, Tom Morello, asked, "What if I could replicate the sounds outside my window on my electric guitar?" As he tried to replicate helicopter sounds and police sirens, he discovered new guitar techniques and a signature sound. Jerome Robbins created one of the best Broadway shows ever by asking, "What if Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet was set in 1950s New York and based on 2 teenage street gangs of different ethnic backgrounds?" What followed was West Side Story. Paradoxically, asking what-if questions that include constraints tend to open up creative avenues. When you give AI chatbots creative constraints, like rewrite this paragraph in fewer than 40 words, or rewrite this sentence with the word spontaneous, you usually get interesting results. When I write, I like to ask myself, what if I had to create a draft in 5 minutes? Or what if I had to explain this book in 1 sentence? Author Rick Rubin says, George Perec wrote an entire book without using the most common letter in the French alphabet, E. It went on to become one of the most celebrated experimental works in modern literature. The painter Yves Klein decided to limit his palette to 1 color. This led him to discover a shade of blue no one had ever seen before. As you explore various what-ifs, stay open to unexpected outcomes. Ancient Chinese alchemists searching for immortality accidentally found that saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal led to a combustible substance called gunpowder. Over the last 120 years, chemists experimenting in their labs have unexpectedly invented penicillin, plastic, and post-it notes. Rubin says, consider how many innovations that might have changed the world have been lost because someone was so focused on their goal, they missed the revelation right in front of them. The next state that leads to more creativity is the clean slate state. When you work on something for too long, you become blind to the ways you can make it better. But if you step away and return to your work a week later, you'll see new ways to iterate your work that you failed to spot before. Thankfully, we don't need to step away from our work for a week to clean our mental slate and adopt a fresh perspective. If we can cultivate a sense of awe during everyday experiences and spot things that people overlook, we will go into every work session with a clean slate. When you walk through your neighborhood, actively notice things you've been overlooking, like the design of a house or different leaves on a tree. When you listen to a familiar song, pretend like you're hearing it for the first time and listen for lyrics or instrumentals you've never noticed. The beauty of trying to see things for the first time is that you stop telling yourself stories about the way things are or should be and open yourself up to new experiences. The next state we must practice is the inspired state. Enter an inspired state by imitating work you admire. Imitating is a creative act because as you imitate people's work, you put it through your filter of unique experiences and create work that only you could make. Rubin says the Beatles were inspired by American rock and roll, artists like Chuck Berry and the Shirelles. But when they played, it was different. It wasn't different because they wanted it to be so. It was different because they were different. In Malcolm Gladwell's latest book, he imitated Michael Lewis's character development technique and brought his writing to a new level. I read Gladwell's book and never once thought that he sounded like Michael Lewis, even if Gladwell feared he might have. Imagine that every piece of work that inspires you is challenging you to elevate your game and inviting you to use it as a launch pad to make your next creation. Now, the more distant your inspirations, the better. A classical musician inspired by a heavy metal band will be more likely to produce something original than a classical musician inspired by another classical musician. Now, the final state we must routinely tap into is the novel approach state. If you're stuck on a creative project, don't try harder and beat your head against the wall. Instead, switch it up. Think of switching it up like a fisherman, changing his bait, or moving to another part of the lake to catch a fish. Here are a few switch-ups that may produce creative insight effortlessly. Try lowering the stakes. Make your work smaller and less significant. Rubin likes to tell stuck songwriters to come back into the studio tomorrow with just one new line. If you're struggling to think of a good business idea, generate 10 bad business ideas. Soon you'll have idea momentum, and you can turn your focus back to producing good ideas. Try changing the environment. Go to a noisy coffee shop, or work on a park bench, or go home to a quiet office to see what new insights come your way. Andy Warhol allegedly painted his best work with a television, radio, and record player playing simultaneously in the background. Rubin has found that turning off the lights in the studio while bands are playing often leads to creative breakthroughs. Another way to switch it up is to inject new imagery. Imagine someone you love, or imagine a scene from your favorite movie while you work to see if it sparks creativity. Rubin once told a struggling keyboardist, imagine there's a beautiful green hill covered in trees and flora, and a battle has just ended. Smoke drifts off the hill and reveals wounded soldiers scattered along it, waiting for help to arrive. Play your solo like that. The music that followed was beautiful. In the end, tune into a creative state by cycling between 4 states: the experimental state, the clean slate state, the inspired state, and the novel approach state. The more often you live in a creative state, the more likely you are to produce creative work that stands out and stands the test of time. Rick Rubin says, as human beings, we come and go quickly, and we get to make works that stand as monuments to our time here. Michelangelo's David, the first cave paintings, a child's finger paint landscapes, they all echo the same human cry, like graffiti scrawled in a bathroom stall. I was here. That was the core message that I gathered from The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. This is a book you can turn to time and time again for inspiration and insight. I highly recommend it. If you would like a 1-page PDF summary of insights that I gathered from this book, just click the link below and I'll be happy to email it to you. If you already subscribe to the free Productivity Game email newsletter, this PDF is sitting in your inbox. If you like this video, please share it. And as always, thanks for watching and have yourself a productive week.